All right, so we are live. This is Matthew Schutte. I'm here with John Keldon, and this is our third episode of Sceenius Sessions. For those of you who aren't familiar with us, we pick a topic, flip over a card from Sceenius.com, chat about it a little bit, then we flip over another card and we invite you to participate by discussing it in the comments. John, what's our topic for today?
Today's the topic, what is a good starting point for co-creating value together with the client?
Okay.
And our first card to riff on is outcome, the result of a series of decisions.
All right. So how does that relate to the creating a good relationship? What was the framing with the
client? What is a good starting point for co-creating value together with the client? I mean, so if I would just have created value for a client, that would have been sort of that simple, because outcome, and then I sort of do my shenanigans, and client dazzled, outcome reached, right? And he pays me, right? But the trick here now, as I'm seeing, it's kind of co-creating value together with the client. So suddenly I need to do that whole series of decisions, and I need to invite the client sufficiently into that sort of decision. So it's kind of decision-making, sense-making somehow, right? Which complicates things.
Yeah, my experience with this is basically it's a dance, right? It's a dance back and forth of trying to understand who they are. And most of the time when I'm working with clients, it's the leadership of a publicly traded company, right? So there isn't really a single they there, right? It's a whole organization, and it's a bunch of different people, and they have different desires and different needs. And so for me, I'm trying to build trust with the different individuals that I chat with, so I can get decent information about what their actual problems are, so that we can not just touch on the surface of what needs to get solved, but figure out what the actual outcome is that they're looking for.
Yeah.
So a simple example, I used to run corporate accounts for a place called Tech Shop, and Tech Shop is like a do-it-yourself maker space, like a do-it-yourself workshop and fabrication laboratory. And running corporate accounts basically meant I sold team building events, and eventually I created a consulting firm, and we did a lot of learning journeys and things like that. When we would do the team building events, I would get clients who would call me up and say, "Hey, we want to come do something fun."
Yeah.
And I would get them on the phone, and I would say, "Great, tell me a little bit about your team." And I would start by asking them about who they were, where they, oh, this is a quarterly thing we do. There's 10 of us in the office. It's mostly engineers, but we do work with some sales folks too. But there's not really great relationships between those two groups, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And eventually, after I had listened enough to gain an understanding of where they were at, I would ask, so what do you really want to get out of this, right?
Yeah.
And what they really wanted to get out of it at the end of the day was never, oh, we want to get out of the office and do some team building. It was always, well, we've kind of got some issues to work through, and we don't want this to be too serious. We want to have a great time, but it would be awesome if ...
Yeah.
But you can't just jump straight into that, right? It takes time, and I'm also not able to just sit there and ask questions of them. I have to give them a feel for who I am and be vulnerable with them about me, my background, my humanity, etc., what I'm good at. Like, we have to get all of that stuff on the table so that they know who they're interacting with, so that they feel like they're on solid foundation in terms of which next step to take. If I'm the guy who's great at getting their people to play ping pong, great. Well, that's what they would talk about. But because I take the conversation to a deeper place of, well, if you had the perfect day, what's the change that happens back in your office?
Yeah.
it pushes them into a deeper place. But I can't do that as question number one, right? You've got to build the trust first. And the last little point I'll make there is a friend of mine, Christopher Allen, has a great blog post on his blog at lifewithalacrity.com, I believe. Google it, Life with Alacrity, Christopher Allen. Yeah. He has a great blog post on progressive trust. And it's really about the mechanism of trust. The way that we start by making ourselves a little bit vulnerable, and then the other person sort of honors that and takes care of that, and then they make themselves a little vulnerable, and we do this dance back and forth over time, and through continued investments in the relationship, right, where we've taken risks to build a stronger bond between the two of us. Eventually we're able to rely on one another for really big things, or expose ourselves and make ourselves vulnerable in really profound ways. But we don't do that with strangers, right? We have to build up that.
I mean, also, I mean, by the way, I love what some of the stuff he's writing. I think I connected with him a couple of years ago, so that's really good. The whole sort of progressive building of trust, because try as I might, I really couldn't find anything wrong with anything of what you said, right? Because it's so perfectly matches with, this is how it is done, right? You can see even in a text interaction online, right? There's, you know, that this comment they sort of put forward said, hey, can we be friends, right? You see it in anything kind of in the, and there's actually another guy I wanted to rope into this, right? Kind of Vinay Gupta. He shared a thing, and he shared it out in the public domain, I think, because he really wants to get out there, kind of trusting the world, right? So, and he mentions 3 words, kind of preferences, wants, and needs, right? So in this dance, if we take great care in always honoring the other person's true need, right? Whether that's kind of the heartfelt core meaning of the very kind of client business or whatever it is, right? So the more we do that, the more direct or going deep or put the probing questions or being honest or vulnerable and requiring transparency and whatnot with both the wants and the preferences. I mean, those are sort of negotiable, right? So, and then we can fairly quickly, this might take, right? Not sure if that's sort of jives with you, but the more I can honor that need without actually having to sort of mention it straight up, right? Because that's terrible, right? Mm-hmm. Kind of cut the crap, cut the bollock, kind of tell me what you actually need. I mean, if you start there, I mean, it could work, right? But it's kind of a long shot, right? No, but if you are willing to negotiate on those, including your own character, right? These are my preferences, and I know those are kind of a bit odd, but that's me. Mm-hmm. You build and build and build. So not only build your progressive trust, but the trust actually gets stronger. Because now suddenly, eventually, there's lots of preferences and wants, and everyone realizes those are all up for grabs, and we could sort of change stuff, and no one will get offended, right? Yeah. As long as we really deeply honor the middle of it, right? Kind of the let's not mess with that, right?
Yeah. And it's interesting, you know, there's a company, I think I've mentioned them before, Odebrecht, who right now is like at the center of a huge scandal in Brazil. They've just, the Congress, the lower house of the legislature just voted to oust the president related to this, to impeach the president. And the former CEO of Odebrecht is in prison for, I think, something close to 20 years. But the company was founded by his grandfather, who was pretty amazing. And one of the things that they really understood as an organization was they structured their entire organization to seek out and understand what it was that the client actually needed, not just what the client thought they needed. Yeah. And to be relentless at making sure that they solved for the actual needs, and did so even if it meant they lost business. And because that is something that was sort of systematized, like it was just baked into the culture of the organization. It wasn't a process thing, though process contributed to that culture. It was a cultural thing. Because it was baked in, very quickly they trained their clients to be able to rely on them. Right? Their clients learn super fast. If you want something done right, you hand it to those guys. And so this isn't just a first-time conversation thing, right? And you had talked about, hey, how do you co-create value with your customers? That's the topic for today. It doesn't just happen the first time. It's an ongoing process. And as you demonstrate that you actually have their best interests at heart, and that you might not be perfect, but you're going to do your best. You're going to go as far as you can to do right. The natural inclination for somebody the natural way for them to respond to that is, great, you're handling this better than I possibly could. You do it.
Yeah.
So
no, I mean, there's a very kind of perfect moment to actually contrast with the other approach, right? Where you suddenly find yourself with a 500-page contract, because that needs to take care and honor all those preferences, no matter how minute they are, right? And then obviously that can work, because I've heard someone mention possibly that might work. So let's give them the benefit of the doubt. That actually has worked somewhere, right? Because I know that these contracts gets made.
They get made, but they don't make for good business.
At least it keeps the lawyers happy, right?
That's right. And you end up spending all your time battling over nuances that don't matter because you haven't built trust in a relationship.
But I mean, possibly
later on in court,
if we mention your kind of one of the core dimensions, at least with this sort of core thing, is trust, right? And the relationship and how it sort of weaves together with culture. So suddenly it just makes sense to sort of continue to do business with you, right? Then the whole 500-page thing is wrong on sheer principle, because you don't get to the real thing.
It's rooted in mistrust.
No, I mean, and also additionally, the trust gets suddenly brittle.
That's right. It is rooted. The 500-page contract is rooted in mistrust. Now, that's not to say you don't write things down, right? But you come to an understanding through conversation, and then you memorialize that conversation and that shared understanding in writing. And part of the reason you're memorializing it in writing is to make sure that you are actually on the same page, because oftentimes in conversation, people hear the same, they heard the same words, but they understood two different things. And writing is one of those ways of going, wait, so we were agreeing to this and this and this, right? But if you start by trying to write out the agreement, you're going to get bogged down in all kinds of, who's holding the bag when things go south, and that's not at all where you want to be basing it from. And at the same time, you want to, if possible, constrain bad action by structuring things in ways where longer-term relationships are at stake. If it's not your own long-term relationship, if you know this is going to be a short-term interaction, like you're a traveler coming through or whatever, you're stopping at a place to get your car fixed, you would prefer to try to get somebody else involved who does have a longer term relationship with them. To just be aware of the interaction and to sort of be there to communicate what happened here should things go bad.
I mean,
and that pressure to manage for the long term.
I mean, even so, when I was out driving the other day, right, and I had to fill gas on the car, and I kind of know that woman, cashier woman, she's smiling, and I pay her like $40 or something. It still kind of matters that I sense that her smile was not just fake. That kind of mattered still. And this is a very, very short and sweet transaction, and we might not possibly see each other ever again. It still matters, right? So she did the right thing. I mean, you can't really go into that. But if I would have the time and just jotting down things, and I would be kind of slightly more anal about stuff, I could possibly kind of send a memo to her CEO and say, that's a damn good employee. Treat her well, right? Give her a raise, right, already. Sure. So it kind of, but karma takes care of these things, right? If you do things from your heart, it works out, right? Yeah.
When you treat people well, they tend to come back. My dad used to manage retail stores, and he would teach his people, just treat them like they were family, but family that you actually like, you know? And if you treat people that way, when they've got a day off and they don't know what to do with themselves, guess where they're going to go? They're going to go hang out at the place where they get treated well. Yeah. They might not even buy anything, but they're going to come hang out. And eventually, one day, they'll buy something. And is that why you're treating them well? No. You're treating them well because it feels good to treat people well. Yeah. But doing so does pay in the end. Yeah. And the other piece here that's kind of interesting is how humans are just naturally built to build relationships and to protect and nurture relationships. And the example that's popped into my head actually doesn't have to do with the beginning of a relationship. It has to do with later parts of a relationship. And I'm thinking of a book that was written, I'm blanking on the author's name, but it was called The Man Who Lied to His Laptop. And what that book is about how we lie even to inanimate objects about how much we like them. Yeah. And the gist of the book is they did some research where you would, do some study or some survey thing on a laptop, and if you then were asked to rate your experience on that laptop, you would give it pretty high marks. Yeah. But if you were then asked to go across them and to type into another laptop how good the experience on this laptop was, you would give much lower marks. So basically, you were lying we lie to one another's face about how much we like one another and how great the experience was. And we are built to do that. And in part, we're built to do that because that ends up lubricating all of our social interactions, No,
I mean, but you were touching upon something that is pretty profound. I mean, when you said about kind of lying to the laptop, I mean, just lapsed into, hey, there's a movie here kind of with Joaquin Phoenix in the lead role, right? And he develops a relationship with the operating system. I mean, obviously, it's a bit science fiction, but not all that much soon, right? So
it's like 3 years out, right?
Yeah, it's not that far removed, right? Once we have the kind of good enough deep learning algorithm, we're there. So and then it actually becomes important. So still a bit weird questions, right? Do I like my own digital self as a digital avatar? It's kind of a bit iffy to even consider that question now, but soon it won't be, because then if I send part of me out, kind of the simulacra digitals, me, and then do I care enough to build trust? I mean, then the digital avatar will come back to me, include me in on possible business deals, and here's some blog posts, and here's some stuff, and here's some other people that you might want to consider bringing into your network. Do I trust that? Well, chances are that digital avatar 5 years from now actually will be more clever than me in actually figuring these things out, right? Mm-hmm. And then it will become an interesting relationship, because then it will be like one of those sort of truly kind of the very word avatar, right? Someone who's kind of clever, more clever than me. And then I might want to consider leveling up in my game, right? So, and I think sort of to move beyond that whole sort of digital divide could then be actually trust, right? Mm-hmm. Let's just consider that these algorithms are sort of, and I actually coined a word for this, kind of flying Daleks of loving grace. I mean, I just took that to sort of have something to think on, right? Because Daleks is one kind of Doctor Who that is kind of exterminate, right? They're out to kill us, right? And Terminator movies and so on, right? But what if they're not, right? What if these algorithms actually can be really, really great, but they won't be unless we don't trust them. So if we can trust the bloody algorithm, then by extension, it's kind of possible to to trust people, right?
And this kind of comes back to what we had talked about the last session that we did, which was one of the things had to do with learning or small steps, and we talked about learning. And we learn through experience, right? Each of our experiences ends up shaping how much we are willing to delegate to others, how much we are willing to rely on them, how much we're willing to trust them. And it doesn't matter who the other is, right? That could be a person, that could be a computer, that could be a phone, right? If our connection is really poor, I learn not to trust the connection, and I will repeatedly say, "Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Can you hear me now?" And so we adjust our steering on the basis of our experience. And so I completely agree that we will rely on algorithms, but we will be checking for how useful are they to us. Is this thing screwing well? Is it serving somebody else's interest rather than mine, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah. No, I mean, we do project things, right? I mean, I have a smartphone. It's getting on to going to be 2 years old now, and the battery is kind of a bit on its last legs, right? So I can be frustrated with my own smartphone. But I also am sort of sane enough to realize that doesn't actually make any sense, because it's just a thing. I can't be frustrated on a thing because it's just a thing. It can't respond to my frustration, right? I can obviously hit it or throw it into the wall or throw it out the window, but it's kind of, yeah.
So it might not be able to change, but you can change.
Yeah.
And frustration is just a reaction to pain.
Yeah.
And as we had talked about previously, pain is a prioritization tool and an incredibly valuable steering mechanism. And so when we experience frustration repeatedly, let's say with a cell phone, eventually that leads us to go, all right, you know what? I'm just going to go buy a new one. And we're willing to endure a different pain or path or whatever because this pain has become too high to bear any longer. So it still lets us steer.
Yeah. I mean, frustration is one of those kind of really valuable, almost invaluable elements of life where we actually get to anticipate meaningful change. So this is, and I mean, if we get to that, then it almost becomes funny, right? Because I mean, my particular pet peeve is cords. I really don't like cords, right? Because they tangle, and if you put cords in your pocket, in your jacket, it's kind of, and I take some comfort in the fact that it's not just me, right? There's others who have this thing, right? So it's kind of that, but it's also a very valuable thing, right? But I mean, obviously, whenever possible, Wi-Fi, love that. Smartphone, not tethered, fantastic. So, but also those, if we bring that back to the kind of outcome, series of small decisions, I kind of still know that actually those need to form some kind of evolutionary trajectory, right? So one step builds upon another. So it probably just me not wanting to bring on board things that I actually know already. So it's kind of, but now and then it's actually kind of nice that some client just says, you mean that? And then it just happens, right? I mean, the wireless transfer of insights, and then you're there. But yeah, so those decisions are, I guess what I'm saying is that if we allow ourselves to be informed by stuff, by things, by algorithms, it actually helps us to extend that into where it actually matters quite a bit more. I mean, you and me having a conversation, we are having a conversation with the client, and the client, it's my experience that you just need to get 1/3 down, and then the client actually sort of makes, he seems to be heading a fairly good good path, right? Let's just sort of tag along and see, kind of. So, and that simplifies enormously, because then you don't need to sort of put on the full spiel. You don't need to put on the full contract right from the start. I mean, you just need to be good enough, right? And be willing to listen and, okay.
And so build the human relationship, right? At the end of the day, it's about that. And so I usually start any negotiation. I had a negotiation yesterday, and I start the negotiation with, This is how we do business. We focus on building relationships, period. Longer term. That's what I'm interested in. You know, and we can talk through how to do that, but just to give you a heads up, that's how I work, you know, and then we go from there. But, and that was a, you know, how much are we going to get paid negotiation, right? It's like, well, I mean, let's have a conversation.
No, but I mean, those are fun, right? But once you begin to switch that, if I can have a meaningful relationship with a thing, then it doesn't make sense to believe in scarcity anymore, because then it's up to me, right? I mean, obviously, me and chords and so on. So still, possibly, I believe in scarcity because sometimes, right? And and life is short and all that. But yeah. But anyway, I mean, what we could do now, because this has been a wonderful expose of weaving lots and lots into. We almost figured out kind of what makes for sort of quality outcomes here. We sort of went one better than what the card said, right? Mm-hmm. And now might be the time to sort of just invite others, sort of the gentle audience, to weigh in on what follows from this, right? And, well, it means that I will need to go check with the next card. So out of quality outcomes follows card number 2. Not unsurprisingly, promise is the card number 2 right here. A commitment to do something.
All right, so ladies and gentlemen, we want to hear from you. What are your thoughts on this, particularly as our discussion thus far relates to promise? What's the subtitle there, John, again?
A commitment to do something.
There you go. Thank you so much. Until next week. See you soon.